The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on our call today. My name is Christina Spearman from Transcat, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Our webinar topic is Elevated Skin Temperature Screening, How to Get Back to Work Safely. This topic is being presented by Russell Hall from FLIR. Russell Hall is a channel partner manager for FLIR. He has been with FLIR almost 2 years and is a level 1 certified thermographer. Russell is based out of Wisconsin, but supports Transcat nationally. We expect today's presentation to last roughly 40 minutes, and then we'll answer any questions that have been submitted. During any time during the presentation, you can send questions through the question box to the right in your webinar controls. I also want to mention that this webinar is being recorded. Each of you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recorded webinar and the slides of today's presentation. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Russell.
Hey, thanks, Christina, and thanks everybody for joining today to learn a little bit about FLIR and our elevated skin temperature solutions. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So a quick agenda. We'll go over a FLIR overview and our history of EST. So again, elevated skin temperature solutions. The correlation between skin and core body temperature, they're not one and the same. How to effectively screen and set up your system for EST, and then the FLIR kind of solution, our how we do it, how we come up with the results and the testing, and then ultimately the different solutions, the different products that we offer. So a little bit of the overview of who FLIR is and the subject of EST. So FLIR, we're about a $2 billion organization. We're a global manufacturer. So a lot of the business is done here in the US, but we do have a presence around the globe as well. Out of all the different products that we sell, about 60% of them have a thermal imaging detector or core inside of them. So at the root of it, we're really based on our infrared technology. We also have test and measurement tools and such that don't always have an infrared detector inside of them. We also make infrared detectors for other manufacturers, so sort of like an OEM. The different segments that we have: predictive, preventative maintenance, security, oil and gas, and then also government and defense. So a quick introduction to thermal imaging and how it works with EST and what it can do and what it can't do. So when we're talking about thermal imaging and you're pointing it at somebody to get their temperature, you're actually getting their surface temperature or their skin temperature. You're not getting their body temperature. Thermal imaging cameras, not ours, not anybody else's, can see through somebody's body and through their skin and actually understand or see what their core body temperature is. So that's why we call it EST. You might hear things like elevated body temperature or EBT. We like to refer to it as elevated skin temperature because that is the reading that you're actually taking. And then lastly, these thermal imaging cameras, they're not a medical device, so we can't diagnose you with an infection, i.e. coronavirus. We can't say that you do or do have coronavirus. We can say if you're having an elevated temperature, which is related to, not the same, but related to elevated body temperature, which could be an indication or a symptom of an infectious disease like coronavirus or SARS or anything else. So these thermal imaging cameras are meant to be a first line of defense for some screening, and then we recommend that you also have secondary screening in place as well. And we will talk more about that throughout the presentation. So a little bit of history. So FLIR started as Agema Infrared Systems back in 1968, basically the inventor of thermal imaging technology. Since that time, FLIR has been the world leader in thermal imaging. So in 1998, some mergers, some acquisitions happened, and that's when FLIR was born. And really throughout all of history, we've been the world leader, the global leader in thermal imaging technology as we are today. For EST, for elevated skin temperature, our solutions, we started making our solutions able to detect this back in 2003. So there was a SARS outbreak back in 2003. We shortly later then registered with the FDA for a 510K registration. So we've been FDA registered for over 16 years for this type of technology in screening. We saw another surge in demand and people looking for answers back in 2009 with the H1N1 or the swine flu. Again, the SARS and the swine flu, maybe more regionally based around the globe, didn't really hit, luckily, didn't really hit the United States as much as obviously the coronavirus is this year. And then again, FLIR was called upon to deliver some solutions in 2014 as the world dealt with Ebola. So another nasty virus that people were looking to properly screen individuals as they came through airports, bus stations, all of that, to keep the people safe and to stop, to decrease the spread of the Ebola. And then obviously here in 2020 with the coronavirus, FLIR again is humbled to provide these solutions that can help you and your people and your facilities and your family stay safer by catching early signs of symptoms that somebody might be carrying this nasty disease. So now if we look at just 2020, so in January, right before coronavirus was really getting up its mustard and taking effect and really here in the United States, the cameras that we were selling and the cameras that we've been selling, for the last 15 years, had what we call screening mode on board. And like last year and, the first month or two of this year, we continue to sell probably about 99% of our cameras were going for predictive preventative maintenance, and then like 1% were for screening people, but because it wasn't always prevalent. When we got to March, we really saw that start to flip-flop. Now people 99% of the time are buying our cameras to help screen for coronavirus, and still, now it's like that 1% are getting it for predictive preventative maintenance. So we really saw, the balances swing. So we got hit with coronavirus in March. Quickly thereafter in May, we started making some updates to our cameras because obviously we saw that this was going to be a sustained need. So we started developing even more new solutions for you, our customers. In June, we came out with facial recognition. So again, this is a faster software, something that you can do rapidly, get screen results, pass-fail results in under a second. So really, we're taking these solutions to the next level, what we had before. What we had before still works and is great. And if you bought a camera 2 years ago and you have it, at your desk, you can actually start screening people with that camera today. But we also have these things that you can enhance your camera. So similar to, or just like our on-camera screen EST mode. So this is a new solution that we came out with. This is like a firmware upgrade for previous cameras, or existing cameras. Again, like if you bought one 2 years ago. Also, these will come standard on our new models that are handheld EST and our fixed mount EST solutions. Now, these cameras, we'll talk about them a little bit later as well. These cameras are specifically made for screening humans for elevated skin temperature. So while our traditional predictive preventive maintenance cameras, they might have a temperature range of -4 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, when you're screening, when you're pointing this at a human all day, you're really concerned about temperatures around 92 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't need that huge temperature range. So what we did with these products is we stripped out a lot of those features and benefits of our predictive preventive maintenance cameras so that we could bring the cost down and bring the price point down. And so now the temperature range on these is only 59 to 113 degrees. So when we do that, it's easier to make, it's easier to produce, it's quicker to get out to you all that need these solutions. And we're continuing to come out with new products as well. So we're hoping to launch some new products here in hopefully September, October. Don't have all the details on that. Christina and I will be hosting another webinar for Transcat here next month. So hopefully for that webinar, we'll have some more topics and more solutions to speak to. So again, this is a little history of the EST. FLIR's been in this business for over 16, 17 years, and throughout that time, and in particular this year, creating a lot more new solutions. All these solutions are also FDA certified and cleared. So everything that from 2004 to today, everything is cleared and registered with the FDA. So when we talk about the markets and the customer types, FLIR, like a lot of businesses, we like to break down our business into different silos: manufacturing, security, industrial, government and defense, all of this. What we see with screening, though, is you kind of throw that out the window. It's every and all market types could really benefit from screening, because at the root of it, what we're concerned about is where people congregate. And it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in or what kind of activities you're doing. If there's going to be, a lot of people, more than 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, then there's potentially a need for these solutions. So, but this is just a smattering of some of the different markets and customers that, we've been working with this year and previous as well. So mentioned there's a correlation between skin and body temperature. So this is actually an ISO standard. What you can see here in the image is this male under thermal imaging, under a thermal imaging camera. What you can see is by his eyes, the inner corner of his eyes, that's the hottest and the most prevalent spot on his face. And so actually what one of the ISO standards is that that's the best reading you can get on a human from their skin to really determine what their body temperature might be or what the correlation is. So the canthus of the eye, and we'll talk about this a little bit throughout the presentation because it is important. The canthus of the eye is the least susceptible to environmental changes. So I live in Wisconsin. Today it's hot. Today it's about 95 degrees, but we also have our brutally cold days in the winter, in the negatives or in the single digits. So everybody, you've been out in the hot, you've probably been out in the cold, and you know that your forehead, your ears, your nose, all those areas, your fingers, your toes, all those areas get really cold really quickly. Or your forehead, if you're standing out in the sun, it's going to get really hot really quickly. And so some of these environmental changes really impact what our skin temperature is. And so here's another image of this gentleman. And now what we're talking about is, again, his forehead versus his eyes. You can see here that the eyes, where it's this white, this really bright white and hot yellow, that's going to be a hotter temperature. When you look at his forehead, you're getting some more of that orange. That's going to be a lower temperature. And so when we're doing these screens, it's important that we're not taking the temperature of the forehead, because that's not going to be the best indicator of what the person's temperature is. Again, that could be susceptible to if the person's wearing a hat, if they've been out in the sun, if they're sweating. The reason that we sweat is to cool ourselves off. So if you have sweat on your forehead, that means that your forehead is cooling off, and you have that liquid, the moisture coming on your forehead, that's going to cool you off. So if you have these different things going on, it's really going to skew the results. And so it's important, again, that we're looking at the inner canthus of the eyes to determine that best correlation between the skin and the body temperature. The other thing that we have to take into consideration is that healthy skin temperatures can vary. Healthy skin temperature can be anywhere from about 92 degrees, 92.5 degrees, to really about 99 degrees. And so we did a couple experiments over here at FLIR, some different testing, some different trials, where we took, and this was in our Sweden office where a lot of our cameras are made, where we took about 70, 75 different individuals' temperatures, just to see where everybody was at. They're all in relatively the same environment, the same office building. Everybody was at rest. Nobody came straight from a workout or, running from their car. And what we saw was that the temperature fluctuated, a decent amount. So this is in degrees Celsius. So we see that the hottest is about 35.6 degrees Celsius, with the lowest being down here about 33.7 degrees Celsius. So about a 2 degrees Celsius swing between, the hottest and the lowest. And that makes sense because what we also see is that body temperature fluctuates. We learned in 6th grade science that, humans are 98.6 degrees, right? That's kind of the number that sticks out to everybody. Well, everybody's going to be either a little bit hotter, a little bit lower than that. And there's a lot of different factors for that, whether it's the time of the day, the activity level that that person has, gender, ethnicity, age, and even like your sleeping patterns. So, my work hours are pretty standard. In the morning, 7 or 8 till the evening, 5 o'clock or so. So I'm sleeping during this time, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And even when we're at sleep, our bodies are calm, our bodies are still, and our core temperature will actually decrease. Maybe on a nice cool night, you have the windows open, you have some, nice cold fresh air coming through, you got the AC blasting. So your body temperature is actually going to drop. And then as you wake up and go throughout your day, you get your morning coffee, maybe you take the dog for a walk in the morning, maybe you work out during your lunch hour. All of those things are going to fluctuate your body temperature. So again, a healthy core body temperature can range between about 97.7 to 99.5 degrees. So there is those variations. But what we found, and through medical research and discovery, is that the best correlation is going to be at the inner canthus of the eye to get this. So how do we set up an effective screening system in a process? So a couple things. One, you want to make sure that you're complying with the FDA. All of our cameras have a plus or minus 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit accuracy. So FDA, their requirements are plus or minus 0.9, so we're well within and exceed that. Our cameras are also very, very stable. The drift on our cameras, and we'll see some results of this, the drift on the cameras is very minimal. One of the big guidelines, and this has been a guideline since all of this started, years ago, is that the technology should be used to measure only one subject's temperature at a time. So there's some solutions out there that say it can measure 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 40 people at one time. Here to tell you that you're going to get flawed results if you try to do that. It is not a good screening setup, and something that even the FDA has called out as not how you want to be using your thermal imaging cameras for this application. So we'll go through a couple different scenarios. I think I have 4 slides here on how folks are screening, what's good, what's bad, what you should look out for, how you should set it up. So passive versus active screening. So there's claims out there that the subject being screened does not need to pause or look directly at the camera. So this is an example of a passive screening, meaning, right now I'm looking at my webcam, I'm looking directly into it, I'm paused, I'm still. A passive screen would be, you're not really looking at the camera, you're moving, you don't come to a stop, you just walk through it, and you're not making eye contact with that camera. So this is an example of that. So this is one of my colleagues, Rob. He took this picture. I've got a timestamp down here, May 11th, just earlier this year. And Rob's current reading, his current temperature, is 96.3 degrees. So inside of this rectangle box, and then we have this red crosshair here, it's looking for the hottest temperature in that image. And at this time, Rob is 96.3 degrees. You can see that it's right at the bridge of his nose, kind of right under his glasses. Now when Rob, just a minute later, takes off his hat, takes off his glasses, and looks now directly at the camera, we can see that his temperature has now jumped to 97.9 degrees. And you can see that that red crosshair is resting right over the inner canthus of his eyes. So he went from 96.3 to 97.9 degrees. Now, that doesn't mean that his body temperature raised that much in a minute. He didn't go run a marathon. He didn't go do 100 push-ups and jumping jacks, or anything like that. All he did was simply remove his glasses, his hat, and look directly at the camera. And when he presents himself to the camera can actually take a good reading of his temperature. And so now he's 97.9. Now, again, that doesn't mean that he's sick, but it just means that, you know, he's hotter than 96.3, and that's something that you want to be aware of. So the result of not doing an active screen is that this practice will lead to the camera missing sensitive data around the inner canthus of the eye. If you don't give the camera a chance to find your eyes, to look at you, and you're not pausing in front of it, it's going to be missed. Similar to this is glasses on versus glasses off. So there's claims out there you don't have to remove eyewear. The camera can still detect you, and so can the facial recognition. So this is another colleague, his son. So took a picture of his son here. He's got glasses on. And you can see this white crosshair indicates this temperature up here, 75.6 degrees. When he takes those glasses off, right again at the inner canthus of the eye, we said he's 96.1 degrees Fahrenheit. So IR detectors, they cannot see through glass. They can't see through a window. They can't see through eyeglasses. They can't see through bifocals, sunglasses, work goggles, rec specs. They can't see through any of that material. An IR detector or an IR sensor will hit that material and it bounces off almost like a mirror, almost like us brushing our teeth in the morning, looking in the mirror in the bathroom. That's what happens with IR detectors. And again, that's not a FLIR thing. That's not an anybody else thing. That's science. There's no thermal imaging camera that can see through glass. So when we have our glasses on, it's really thrown up this big freeze, right? You can see that his glasses are 75.6 degrees, which is really like ambient temperature, right? It's really just going to be that room temperature that you're in. And it's reflecting and probably hitting off something and picking up a little bit of the surface. So again, if the person's eyes are covered, maybe the forehead raises a little bit, but it's not going to set off any alarms. It's not going to give you that elevated skin temperature that we're ultimately looking for and trying to isolate and weed out or do additional screening. So again, the result here is the thermal cameras cannot see behind glasses as the IR detectors are reflected off of that surface. Focus versus unfocused screening. So claims out there, our cameras can screen multiple people at various distances from the camera. So I got married about 3 years ago, and I'm sure, you know, if anybody here has been married, you've gone through the pictures, the whole thing. You always have that picture where the photographer wants the bride really close to the camera, and then the groom, you know, maybe kind of off in the distance, right? But the bride is the focus of the day. The groom is like, yeah, he was there, he showed up, he put on a tie, looks nice, whatever. So that photographer, she's going to focus on the bride and make sure that she's in focus, looks good, you know, everything's nice, nothing blurry. And then the groom is going to just be in the background and just kind of blend in with the background a little bit. You'll still know that it's a human, you'll still know that it's him, but he won't be focused. So thermal imaging cameras are just like digital cameras. Where a digital camera, you can't focus on the bride that's 5 feet away from the camera and the groom that's 20 feet away from the camera. It can only focus on one or the other, can't focus on both. And thermal imaging is exactly the same. So here's an image of, you know, a blurry person, you know, maybe based on the hair, you know, maybe it looks like a woman. We kind of see the shoulders and the head, right, the outline, and it's getting a reading and it's saying 93.7 degrees. Now, when we bring this into focus, we'll see that, okay, yep, it is a woman, and her reading is now 95.7 degrees. So we just jumped 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you are doing these screens when you have multiple people coming, or you're trying to take temperatures of everybody in a line, there's one person at point A, and then point B is 3 feet behind that, and point C is 5 feet behind that, and so on and so forth. Only one of those people is actually going to be in focus at one time. So while the camera, maybe it's picking up some facial recognition or something, or it's going to give you a temperature reading, just like our camera gives you a temperature reading on an unfocused object, it's just not going to be accurate because the pixels aren't getting all the data and all the sensitivity that they need to give you a good image and good results. So again, the result of trying to screen multiple people when one of them is going to be unfocused, or several of them are going to be unfocused, is that the thermal imaging camera can only focus at one distance at a time, leaving other readings out of focus and inaccurate. Another part of screening and the cameras that you want to be aware of is the distance to spot ratio. So there's some claims out there that our camera can be used from greater than 6 feet away. So here is an indication, or kind of like an example of what spot to distance ratio is. So the image here on the left has this camera down here that's a lot smaller compared to the camera over here on the right. So kind of indicating that it's further away from the subject. Now, when you're shooting a subject from a greater distance, whether it's a person or an electrical panel or a motor or whatever, it doesn't matter that it's a person or not. Whenever you're further away from something, you're going to get a bigger area of interest. So you see that this blue circle, right, covers, and this is me this time, this blue circle covers, my whole eye, like my whole socket, my eyebrow, and part of my face, part of my cheek. Now over here, illustrating that we're closer to the camera, now that region of interest is going to be a lot smaller. So all cameras are going to have a certain spot to distance ratio. Let's just use an example of 10 to 1. So what a 10 to 1 spot to distance to spot ratio means is that at 10, let's say 10 inches away, your thermal imaging camera will give you a target of 1 inch. It'll give you a temperature reading inside a 1 inch diameter. When you're 20 inches away, now it's going to have a 2 inch diameter. If you're 10 feet away, you're going to have a 10-foot diameter as your target, as that measurement. So making sure that you have a strong a camera with a strong distance spot ratio, and that you're not more than 6 feet away, because the further away that you get, the less accurate your results will be, or the less precise your results will be. So we can see here that inside of this circle, we have a max of 95.6 degrees, a min of 84.4, and this average of 91.3 degrees. So a camera will take, if this was like this was the extent, the camera would only read that 91.3 degrees. It would take all of the temperatures inside here, and it averages them to get you your 91.3. And again, 91.3, that's obviously fairly low. Now, when we look at just this spot, when we tighten up that window, when we get a better performing camera and we bring it to a closer distance, now you're going to get a tighter spot and a tighter reading. So now we're going to have, hey, right here on this spot, you're 95.3 degrees. So result, at more than 6 feet, thermal imaging cameras do not have a strong enough distance to spot ratio and or IR resolution to accurately measure the small region of interest that is the inner canthus of the eye. So when you're 20 feet away, that camera is taking your temperature, but it's taking your temperature of potentially your whole face, not one, not small parts of your face, looking for the hottest temperature on your face. So the system setup is critical for detecting EST. And so then here's a couple examples of, kind of what we talked about, right? And, maybe you can find some of these flaws. So here we have, I don't know, 15, 20 people in this frame, people with glasses on, people on top of each other, right? They're not adhering to the six feet social distancing. Folks at all different levels away, all different distances away from the camera, right? Folks way back here in the background getting a reading, green check mark. And then somehow we're picking up this person right here that's too hot. But they're not in focus, right? Hardly any of them are in focus. And then over here on the right, you kind of see it in thermal. Again, we see these glasses. The glasses are giving us that nice blue purple because it's covering their face and it's just getting the reflection. So if these people do have an elevated temperature, they're not going to see the canthus. That person is going to come through and pass. You're going to have, you know, a bad pass reading. Down here on the lower image, you know, again, this is from a great distance, right? Obviously, this thing's sitting up pretty high in the air, looking down on everybody. This is some sort of airport or transportation center. The gentleman over here on the left, we're seeing the side of his face. We're seeing the back of his head, and it's giving us this reading 99 degrees. You know, people with glasses on, you know, and again, side of the face. Nobody's looking at the camera. These are all passive screens. The camera's finding their face, and that's cool. Facial recognition, it's determined that they're humans, but the camera is not powerful enough. The camera is not close enough, and the camera is, you know, set up for failure, being that it can't focus on any one of these individuals. So these are, you know, guesses at best. The Miami-Dade County, they spent $400,000 earlier this year on some cameras, and they turn out to be unreliable, and they're, you know, not happy with them. So, I mean, you really got to make sure that you're getting a good camera and that the system setup is very critical. So FLIR, we're not immune to a bad setup, right? Our cameras and our guidance is sound and precise and solid, but we can only do as much as, you know, give you that guidance to get the cameras in your hands. So this is a, you know, FLIR setup here, but again, we see a gentleman here. He's out of focus, can't really see his eyes, can't see his mouth, his nose. Multiple people in the frame, glasses on, people wearing glasses. So I mean, it's really critical, again, that you have a good setup, because we're doing this to try and keep the disease away, right? To keep it from spreading. But if you're running a bad test, you're going to get bad results. So it's, again, not trying to harp on it, but I am kind of trying to harp on it. So FLIR, how does FLIR do our screening? What's our secret sauce? So the way that FLIR screening works is that we take samples of people. We take we take people's temperatures, and then we average them in together, because what we're looking for is an anomaly, right? We saw in the earlier tests that skin temperature can vary, core body temperature can vary, right? There could be up to like a 2 or 3 degree variance between healthy people, and that's totally fine. And so what FLIR does is we take those temperatures, we take those readings, and then we average them together. So if Karen comes through and she's 95 degrees, and then I go through and I'm 96 degrees, and then Bill goes through and he's 97.2 degrees, and then Christina comes through and she's 96.2 degrees. We take all of these readings, all of these measurements, and then we sample them together, we average them together. So then we'll have what we call our sampled average temperature, or our reference temperature. So in this case, in this example that I have, the reference temperature is 94.3 degrees. Then we set an alarm temperature, or an alarm threshold. So in our cameras and our devices, you can set a deviation, a standard deviation. FLIR, we recommend 1.8 or 2 degrees Fahrenheit for that standard deviation. So my 94.3 plus 1.8 is 96.1. So in this setup that I have, anybody that comes through and is 96.1 degrees or higher would flag or set off this alarm. And then ultimately, obviously, you need your measured temperature, or the person being screened. So in this case, the measured temperature, 95.2. Again, that's going to be the hottest temperature on their face, which 99 times out of 100, it's going to be the inner canthus of their eye. The camera is going to float to that hottest temperature, and it's going to be right around either side of the nose. So in this situation, 94.3 is the baseline, 96.1, or really 1.8 degrees above that, is the alarm threshold, and then 95.2 is the measured temperature. We use the baseline because depending on the environmental temperature or the environmental conditions, that baseline can change. You could have a baseline in the winter be 93 degrees, right? Because people are coming out from the cold or whatever. But then on a hot day like today, again in Wisconsin, it's 95 degrees outside. Most people might be carrying a hotter temperature, hotter body and skin temperature. So these references, the camera will recognize them and updates them constantly, even throughout the day. So throughout the day, it might be 70 degrees in the morning when you have people coming in for first shift at 7 a.m. And then by that second shift at 3 p.m., it's going to be hotter out, the sun's out. You might see variances just in those times. So we're always looking for a good baseline average temperature and then looking for the anomalies above that. And we set that usually at 1.8 degrees. Now, if you have somebody 1.8 degrees above that, you want to get them screened with a medical grade thermometer to see if they need to, be removed. Camera stability is really important. So that's the other element of our secret sauce, is that the stability and the quality of our cameras. Again, FLIR is the worldwide leader in thermal imaging technology and manufacturing. So we did a test with one of our cameras to test the stability or the drift. A thermal imaging term out there is drift. So over the course of 14 hours, we had our camera pointed at what's called a black body or a stable temperature. So this black body is a constant temperature, and then our camera is just pointed at it. It's a 30 hertz camera, so we're getting 30 readings a second. So I mean hundreds and thousands every minute, and over the course of 14 hours, we're getting hundreds of thousands of data points here. What we saw that for 90% of the measurements, they were all within plus or minus 0.15 degrees. So that's this red line here. So anywhere between 36 and about 36.27 degrees, our camera was right there on target 90% of the time. 99% of the time, we were within plus or minus 0.25 degrees Celsius. And again, the FDA requirements are plus or minus 0.5 degrees Celsius. So we're well within that requirement. And so that really sticks to the stability and the quality of the cameras that we have. The other piece is when you're talking about EST screening, how to assess the accuracy of it. What we're really looking for, there's going to be 4 different things that can happen. You can have the camera say, hey, this person has an elevated skin temperature, and then they have go for secondary screening, and the medical grade thermometer says, yes, you do have an elevated body temperature. That would be a hit. A correct rejection would be the camera says, hey, you're within tolerance, you're not running anything high, you're not out of the norm, you're not that anomaly, you're fine, and then test it against a medical grade thermometer, same thing, this person does not have an elevated body temperature. That would be a correct rejection. So those are what you're going to have the most of. You're going to have people that come through that are fine, their temperature is fine, and they pass through, right? So correct rejection, you're good to go, you're good to pass. Then you could have a false alarm. So a false alarm means the camera, the thermal imaging camera, which again is the first line of defense, the camera says, hey, this person has an elevated temperature, they should be secondarily screened. And then you do that secondary screen, and the medical grade thermometer comes back and says, nope, they're fine, they're 99.3 or whatever, they're not too hot, they're good to go. So that would be a false alarm. The camera says, hey, I think this person's too hot, and then they get screened and it turns out that they're fine and they're healthy. A miss would be the camera says you're fine, but then you get tested against a medical grade thermometer and you do have an elevated body temperature. So those are obviously the ones that we want to avoid the most. And the way that we avoid those is by doing a good system setup, getting a good camera, and then having an operator there to run these and administer these tests and make sure that people are following the protocols that are set forth. All right, so we'll get into some of our different screening solutions. So again, we have a multitude of solutions, really one that's going to fit everybody's kind of style or needs. So first we have our handheld dual purpose. So again, we're even reclassifying how we talk about our cameras this year. So what we mean by dual purpose is these cameras, they can be used for predictive preventative maintenance as well as screening humans. So we have a lot of customers out there that, want to buy thermal imaging cameras and test their employees or their patrons or their guests or their travelers or whoever. They want to test them, but maybe after all of this madness is over, they want to be able to use these cameras for something else, or they don't foresee themselves screening people every day, day in and day out next year, in 2 years when a vaccine is out for coronavirus or whatnot. They want to use that investment for something else. That's when we go with our dual purpose cameras. So you can screen the humans now, or even in the course of a day. You can screen people before they come into the building in the morning. And then once they're in the building, now you can actually go and deploy this camera for predictive preventative maintenance, facilities maintenance, checking electrical panels, critical motors in a manufacturing facility, substations, generators, any of that. They can use those. These cameras, they can be connected to a monitor, so you can have a nice display and people can get your reading and people know where to stand, and you get that pass-fail. They can be mounted on a tripod, so even though they are handheld, doesn't mean that you actually have to hold it the whole time. They come with a universal tripod mount, so they can go on anything. They can also be plugged into a wall. So while they can run on batteries and your battery will last about 3 or 4 hours, you can actually plug these handheld cameras directly into a wall so you have constant power throughout the day. And then these are also compatible with any of the new features and benefits and firmware that we're coming up with. So you buy a camera today and we come out with a new feature next year or in 6 months, you're not going to be left behind. These will be backwards compatible. Then we have our handheld EST. So now these are the cameras that are specific for screening individuals for elevated skin temperature. Again, these are going to be the ones that are going to be a lower price point because we strip out some of those nice features on the dual purpose camera that we just talked about. It's not going to have as high of a temperature range. It's not going to record or take voice annotation or notes and things like that. So we strip out a lot of that stuff to drive the cost down, because there are customers out there that say, I want to set this up, and whether coronavirus is going on or not, I'm going to screen people every day they come into this building, whether there's a pandemic or not. Through good times or bad times, somebody could always be carrying in the flu, right? Somebody could always be carrying in strep throat. And elevated body temperature is one of the indications for a lot of these infections. So there's definitely people out there that want this for only elevated temperature, so they don't want the full feature set and they want to save some money in the process. That's why we developed these cameras. And then we also have fixed mount EST. So similar to the handheld, it's going to have a lot of the same features, but now these can actually be mounted somewhere. These run power over Ethernet. They can be integrated into your system if you have a security system or like a badge in, badge out lock key system. They can be integrated to a lot of these different things to make your building fully functional and really tap into all of that. These can also be mounted on a tripod as well, so they can be kind of freestanding. But what you're getting on these is really like a core and the lens, and so it takes out the rest of it. You need a monitor for this, for the viewing, but these are really slick solution for people that, again, want to do this day in, day out from this point forward, and also plug it into their security system. You could have your security shack, you could have 4 of these in your building, and he could tap into all 4 of these from one computer, from one station, and see what's going on around the whole building, because they can be integrated. This is a video. Let me try and pause it, and I'll set it up a little bit. This is a video of our FLIR Screen EST software. So mentioned as well that we have this software. The software works with any of our cameras, any of the 3 different subsets that we just talked about, the dual purpose, the handheld EST, or the fixed mount EST. The software is compatible with all of those. So the setup that we have here is a T540 camera, and then the software is run off of a computer. So there's a little computing PC, and then connected to this monitor. So this is the front-facing image that people you'll see walk through and get. So I'll just hit play on this. There's no volume, there's no sound, so you're not missing anything. So again, this is very quick, very fast to recognize your face. It has facial recognition, so it does catch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, knows your face, knows you're human, and then takes that temperature reading right at the canthus of the eye. I'll play it one more time so you can see really the speed of it. This gentleman here, again, important to take your glasses off. Just throw them up on top of your head really quick. Everybody pauses for a split second, looks at the camera, gets their reading, and they're on their way. So, in the course of a minute, you can really get through about 30 people. What takes the longest is social distancing 6 feet away, and that, the person that's on deck, if you will, walking up to the camera. The camera's going to read you in a split second, half a second, and give you that pass-fail. Again, all of these folks pass this test, so you get that green check here, and then we also have these custom messages. So no elevated temperature detected. You can actually tap into the software and say whatever you want. So if this is a school and it's Tuesday or something, like no elevated temperature detected, today's Taco Tuesday, or whatever you want. Or if they do set off a trigger, set off an alarm, you could say, go see the nurse, or go, to this station to get, screened with a medical grade thermometer. So it's really customizable. It's really a slick solution. So the FLIR difference, right? Over 10 years of delivering EST EBT solutions. They're turnkey. We have them for handheld or fixed mount if you want to integrate them into your system. Easy to use, rapid to deploy, ability to, again, to integrate. We have global service and training, so we have folks all over the globe that can help out. I'm always happy to help out. Dual purpose. So again, we're not just making one solution, we're making a solution that can be used for multiple things. These cameras, our cameras and others, they're expensive. So if you're going to spend several $1,000s, make sure that you can use it over and over and get the most out of it. And then lastly, US FDA 510K cleared. So we're cleared, we're registered, we're cleared with the FDA. Our cameras are not made in China, so they're not blacklisted. Some of that's going on recently, but the FDA, the government, they're good with you purchasing FLIR cameras. So Christina, I'll throw it back to you for any questions that came through the chat.
All right. Thanks, Russell. That concludes our presentation portion of the webinar. We'll now move into the question and answer session. Just as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please send it through the question box in the webinar controls. So let's move on to the first question. It says, we are using another IR camera system that uses a 37-degree reference source. We have issues with the reference source being bumped and then have to realign it in order to detect a person's temperature. Does the FLIR camera use a reference heat source?
Great question. So I didn't get into it that much about using, a black body. We call it a black body, but that reference temperature that you said is 37 degrees Celsius. So that is one of the potential downfalls of having a black body, is that that's another point of failure, right? Maybe it's supposed to be 37 degrees, but that could change, or if you lose power or something, it's another piece of the puzzle that you have to take into consideration. You also, when you're using these black bodies, you want to make sure, similar to the focus conversation that we were having before, you want if this is the black body, my cell phone, you want this black body to be right next to the person being screened. So again, it doesn't do you much good if the black body is way behind the person or in front of the person. You want, because the camera can only focus at one distance, you want the camera to be focusing on the person and the black body at the same distance. Now this can vary a little bit. They should be pretty good. If you get a good quality one, it should be fine. But it could drift a little bit, and then, like you said, you have to reset your camera. What FLIR does, so how FLIR compensates for this, our cameras have built inside of them, it's called a NUC, an NUC, a non-uniform correction. So our cameras, it's kind of like a black body inside of the camera. Every 30 seconds or minute or so, if you've used one of our cameras, you will hear it shudder. It sounds like, like an old style camera taking a picture. It kind of shudders a little bit. It's really fast. The screen will jump just for like a second, like blinking your eye. And what that's doing is, we have this NUC, this non-uniform correction. It's like a black body that passes in front of all the detectors, and it's at a known temperature source. Let's call it 37 degrees Celsius. It's at this known temperature, and all the detectors point at it and say, the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of detectors point at it and say, yep, I'm reading 37. Yep, I'm reading 37. I'm reading 37. I'm reading 37. So every 30 seconds or minute you get this reading, the camera is going to correct itself. If a detector says, hey, this looks like 38 degrees to me, then the detector actually changes. It says, nope, it's supposed to be 37. It's 37 degrees, not 38, and it will actually uniformly correct itself to read 37. So we don't need to rely on a black body, which again brings another piece of equipment to the puzzle, another expense to the puzzle, and another possible flaw, to the system. So again, the way we do it is with our NUC, our cameras, that's how our cameras stay stable. Like the chart that we saw, 14 hours staying stable. It's because of things like this inside of the camera.
All right. Next question, do the cameras need to be calibrated? And if so, how often?
Good question. Yeah, so we recommend our cameras be calibrated about once every year. When you get it, it's calibrated for the year for sure, and then depending on how much you use it, typically you want to get it in for service about once a year. I see some people push it to like 2 years, but definitely you want to get them calibrated throughout their life.
All right. Next question, can thermal imaging be dangerous to humans?
It can't. So our cameras, or it can, but not when you're screening with ours. So our cameras, and in particular our dual-purpose cameras, do have a laser on them. When you're screening humans, when you set up in that mode, the laser is deactivated. If you did have a thermal imaging camera that had a laser, just like any other laser, it could be damaging to the eye. But FLIR, we automatically disable that laser, and so you're not going to do any harm to anybody.
All right, another one, it says follow up to the calibration. How much cost to calibrate?
It depends on the camera model, but usually I would say around like, I'd be guessing a little bit, but like $500 bucks, maybe up to like $1,000 on one of our very high-end cameras.
And another follow-up is, who does the calibration? Does FLIR do it?
Yeah, so FLIR does it. You could send it directly to FLIR. You could, if you bought it through Transcat, you could send it to Transcat, and then they would send it to us as well. But we have a specified lab out in our office in Nashua, New Hampshire. We have a lab there that goes through like a 20 or 30 point test that we use to calibrate these.
How accurate are the FLIR cameras?
Say that again?
How accurate are the FLIR cameras?
Gotcha. So for screening humans, for doing EST screening, the cameras are plus or minus 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit accurate. For dual purpose cameras, it's usually plus or minus 2%, but that's at, temperatures of, 500 degrees or 1,000 degrees. But when screening humans, it's plus or minus 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. Do you need to be certified to use these cameras, and is there training available?
You do not need to be certified. We do have training available. We have an online class for EST training. So you can get that through Transcat as well. And then it's a class that's hosted by FLIR. And then we have additional training as well. Christina mentioned earlier that I'm a level 1 thermographer, so we have level 1, level 2, level 3, different thermography classes as well. If you do want some higher level training and maybe are going to invest in one of these dual purpose cameras.
All right. That looks like that's all for the questions. So that concludes our time for today. If you do have further questions or would like to find out more about Transcat's product and service offerings, please contact us at 1-800-828-1470 or on the web at transcat.com. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope you get something out of today's presentation and that you continue to join us for the future Transcat e-learning webinars. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, and thank you, Russell.
Yep. Thank you, Christina. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.